Here's a TikTok video, and there's some grouchy old man in the background. It's like, can I walk down the street? These children dancing all the time. Bernie Sanders, I guess very randomly, I thought this was a setup, bumps into a bit of a TikTok dance craze, and he wants no part of it. This looks like it's happening in New York City, and the reasons why that's happening in New York City, despite that the senator is not from there, is because he's out there pushing his book. It's called "It's Okay to Be Angry About Capitalism." So he went on a few shows talking about it here and there. On Sunday, you guys may have seen him on Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan, and things got definitely interesting as he's promoting again this book called "It's Okay to Be Angry About Capitalism." So of course he's going to talk about how people don't want to talk about the things that happen in the country that actually favor capitalism and destroys people's lives and families. Let's watch him talk about the problem with the corporate media. Let's go.
Do you worry when you talk about the corporate media that you are targeting journalists when you say that?
No. Donald Trump talks about fake news, and that's simply to deflect attention from the fact that he's a pathological liar. My experience one-on-one with media, they work hard. They very rarely am I misquoted. But what I am talking about, Margaret, is that corporate media limits the kind of debate that we have in this country. Mm-hmm. You tell me, you know more about it than I do. How often do we talk about income and wealth inequality?
We're talking about right now, Senator.
Yeah, but how often? Not everybody is Bernie Sanders on your show. How often do you talk about concentration of ownership? How often do you talk about the fact that we are the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all? And yet we spend twice as much money. How often do you talk about that if somebody has a baby in Finland, they're getting 9 months off or 10 months off, paid family leave? But let's talk about it. What do they get for that? They get free health care, right? Mm-hmm. Free higher education. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That's the debate I want, and that's the debate we really don't have on the corporate media.
This is the only problem I have with that type of exchange, which, by the way, there's all kinds of truth to it. And we already know the answers to why Margaret Brennan there can't say, well, the reasons why we don't talk about all that stuff is because the people who own this network, the corporations who own this network, don't want that talked about because that doesn't benefit them. And the whole point of that entity existing is to make more money. And if we talk about those things, Americans might start voting differently towards that. Maybe, I mean, not holding my breath, but if people actually understand how these things work and the way that our tax dollars could actually go to benefiting our lives because we pay for all these things and we just don't get any of it, then maybe their dollar amounts, their wallet just might shrink by a few dollars, which absolutely cannot happen. And if she allows that to happen, if that's talked about whenever Senator Sanders is not on, they'll be like, what the hell are you doing? Why are you doing this? You trying to sabotage the network? Who knows? But he definitely brought it to her there. And it seems, be it just Margaret Brennan, she probably agrees with a lot of that. Yeah, I would love to talk about that. You trust me, I'll talk about that. Right now, she will, because she probably does feel that way. But you're not supposed to go off of what you feel. Let's go down to SOT 4 there, you guys, though, because she also brought up healthcare specifically with that. And she claimed our innovative healthcare system is just so advanced. He had to make sure he pointed things out with that too. Watch.
We also have one of the most innovative healthcare systems when it comes to creation of pharmaceutical drugs. You were doing this. No. So when someone hears you lay out the problems with our pharmaceutical industry, as you do in this book, it'd say, but the life-saving vaccines, for example, for COVID, they were created by the United States of America. They were created by the pharmaceutical system with taxpayer help.
Sure. Of course the drug companies produce great drugs. But 1 out of 4 people in America cannot afford the drugs that their doctors prescribe.
Moderna says it's instituting a patient assistance plan to give the COVID shot to the uninsured and underinsured Americans free of cost. Is that sufficient?
And you know, Margaret,
for you?
Amazing coincidence. That happened the same exact day as we announced that we were inviting them to testify.
Do you think your political heat made that difference?
Well, maybe it was just a wild and crazy coincidence. I don't know. But we also want to take a look at what that.
Really fast. There wasn't tons of things there, but I think sometimes this stuff just goes over our heads because it's just a normal line of conversation from Bernie Sanders. But one of those things he then talked about at the back end was how then the same week that they were asking for Moderna CEOs and upper execs to testify about how they're going to be making tons of money on the COVID vaccine when it was funded by Americans. suddenly it's back to being free. Let's look at that headline, because it's an amazing coincidence, is what was said also in Politico, that Moderna offered free vaccines when asked to testify about this whole thing. Bernie Sanders, of course, points out the craziness with that. So, Adrian, there's a lot that gets said, and we hear the truth, and we see the reality, and we see how the money gets moved, and things that we fund, we have to pay for again. But I don't know why it just doesn't stick. Because it's not said enough, or because people just don't understand it?
Oh, no, I think in part, it might be a mixture of both. I think it isn't said enough, because if these networks had to elevate that actual, true, genuine issue that impacts everyone, then they're going to have to stop with the fear mongering and the faux controversies that often go on. Because they're often uplifting things that, sure, they may be important in a very small regard, but when you look at the grander scheme of things, a lot of issues will resort back to this effort of classism and maintaining the sense of class structure, where you always have individuals who are struggling. And so if these networks actually had to bring that to light, then they'd be losing a lot of the power that they have, which is keeping people fighting over other issues that are really completely and totally adjacent to the actual issue at hand, or at least the agenda of that larger 1%.
And maybe a big part about that is people would expect that, from many folks who do hear it or understand this, would only expect that from conservative networks, but don't get that many of these other ones that they trust more also aren't talking about these types of things. They're just not. Maybe in some of those social issues they're on it, but they're just not talking about how the money that flows around and who gets it and how they get it is absolute robbery. I don't know. I guess whenever you say it, you get called woke, and then you get to be ignored.